Thank you for joining us. From the worst wildfire season in the province's history to the NDP knocking out the Liberals' 16-year reign of power, 2017 was a year with all sorts of events impacting our region. Over the next half hour, we share the most memorable CKPG News moments of the year. As we take a look back at 2017, there's no better way to start the new year with some celebration. And as most Canadians do, that means ringing in the new year with excitement and being a little cold. More than 60 brave souls took to Ness Lake to jump into freezing cold water for the 16th annual Polar Bear Dip. Roughly $8,500 was raised for the camper sponsorship fund to help send deserving kids to camp, an opportunity for kids to experience being away from everyday life and experience new activities like canoeing, kayaking, and building model rockets. Tragically, 2017 was not a happy time for all. There was a dark reminder of the dangers of gangs in the community when two men were shot dead on a quiet road in Prince George. Two men were arrested in connection with the double homicide on Foothills Boulevard. The pair appeared in a Prince George courtroom to answer to 2 charges of first-degree murder and another charge of attempted murder. The Prince George RCMP's Serious Crime Unit led the investigation with support from the RCMP's North District Major Crime Unit as well as another specialized unit. The arrests were made in the first 24 hours of the investigation.
I'll say that the lifestyles the deceased lived and those they associated with involved a drug lifestyle and a lifestyle consistent with activities that could lead to gang involvement.
2 other suspects wanted in connection with the murders were later arrested and charged. Candidates running in the Caribou North riding and campaigning in the city of Quesnel had to be creative when it came to placement of signs. The city adopted a bylaw that restricted the number of political campaign signs to be placed on public spaces. That number is 6. However, it doesn't restrict candidates from placing as many signs as they would like on private property with the owner's permission. February came with a bang that shook homes and rattled residents along the Nechako River. A mysterious blast was heard throughout the city, sending emergency crews scurrying. In the end, the source of the explosion was a controlled blast at a rock quarry along Otway Road. Fire rescue personnel, along with RCMP members, searched for the source of the sound for more than an hour before learning of the blast at the quarry. Steve Johansson is the operator of Pat's Pit where the blast took place. He said the Ministry of Energy and Mines was aware of the blasting operation. He added this is the 3rd blasting operation at the quarry, but the first to create such a stir. In March, Prince George successfully bid on hosting another major event. Prince George Mackenzie MLA Mike Morris was on hand to announce this community's success in securing the 2022 BC Summer Games. The Games will bring 3,700 athletes, coaches, and officials to the city to participate in 18 different sports. Morris says he hopes to see a legacy from the Games, much like those that resulted from the Canada Winter Games.
I'm looking for perhaps some kind of a legacy that these games will leave, like we had the stadium or the Matches Place Stadium as one of the legacy projects before. Maybe we can look at something like that as well. So I'm looking forward to see what the Winter Games or the Summer Games Committee can provide us, what their plans are, what it looks like at the end of the day, and what kind of facilities that we can look forward to adding to our great community.
It was a confusing move by the Department of Fisheries and Oceans that created controversy at the Nechako White Sturgeon Hatchery in Vanderhoof. The DFO determined that only half of the 12,000 endangered fish being raised at the hatchery would be released. The other half would be destroyed. After a week of media pressure along with protests by local First Nations, the DFO backed off.
Many of my people, including those that live along the Nechako, Saikas, Stillatin, Notley, want to see these fish to survive, and perhaps holding them in the aquaculture facility would be the best ideal situation.
The alternatives right now are to either go ahead with releasing all the 12,000 into the river and then do more science to prove out to see whether or not that may or may not be an issue going forward. Perhaps look at releasing some of the sturgeon in some of the tributaries of the Nechako River, or maybe even putting some of the sturgeon into Ritchie Lake.
Coming up, 2017 brought some big changes to the province's political landscape. Plus, we'll be announcing our Story of the Year selected by you. "2017's provincial election was one for the history books, as the NDP, with support from the Green Party, was able to knock out the Liberals' 16-year reign of power. But before the NDP took power, the 41st general election came with a lot of confusion, as on election day there was no clear winner. And with all that confusion in various areas of the province, that was not the case for our area Liberal candidates who were running for re-election. Prince George Valemount MLA Shirley Bond and Prince George Mackenzie Mike Morris won their riding, with each surpassing their closest rivals in Natalie Fletcher and Bobby Deepak with 59% and 57% respectively. Neither Green Party candidate won a Prince George riding. Both Nan Kendi and Hillary Crowley felt there was an increase in support for the Greens in the North this election. Hockey fans were treated to the talents of some of the best young players in the country with the arrival of the TELUS Cup. The tournament featured the best midget-age teams from across Canada, including the host Caribou Cougars. Despite an outstanding season, the hosts struggled through the tournament, allowing the Cape Breton West Islanders to win the national crown with a thrilling overtime goal in the final. In May, a Prince George RCMP officer and the dog of an innocent bystander acted heroically, jumping into the frigid waters of the Nechako River to save the life of a woman. Witnesses saw the woman jump from the Cameron Street Bridge shortly after 10:30. They immediately called 911. Constable Cole Ebeling wasted no time racing downstream into the river and pulling the woman to shore, but the dog, who happened to be on a walk with their owner nearby, managed to jump into the water and pull the woman closer to the police officer. Both the dog and Ebeling went into the water without a life jacket.
A female was floating down the river, and with the help of a bunch of bystanders, we were able to go in and get her out.
It was a day many veterans were waiting for, the reopening of the Prince George Veterans Affairs Office. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau made the pledge during his 2015 election campaign to reopen 9 Veterans Affairs offices that were closed by the previous Conservative government. And after a long wait, it was finally open, to the delight of local vets. A 2.5-year-old German Shepherd was the target of a heinous torture that saw him end up with 3 nails in his head. The dog survived the surgery to remove the nails. An investigation opened up, and the North Caribou BC SPCA has been hoping that someone comes forward with information. The SPCA says Kuma came to them after being found in Hickson, left for dead. He had 3-inch nails inside his skull, just missing his brain. Jamie Walsh with the SPCA says they noticed something was wrong when Kuma was dropped off.
He came in underweight, so when an animal comes in sick or injured, we issue an order to the owner for vet care. Upon further examination, we noticed not only is he underweight, but he had some neurological indicators that there might be a further injury happening in his head.
In June, a hostile crowd of close to 250 people heckled BC Transit and city staff at an open house for a proposed BC Transit maintenance shop in the city. The facility was proposed for an area behind Exhibition Park, commonly used by recreationalists. When asked if there were any options, transit officials said there were none. Following the meeting, City Council rescinded a rezoning application, effectively killing the project at that location. The first 2 Highway 16 buses operated by BC Transit rolled into Burns Lake. The buses operate between Burns Lake and Smithers and Burns Lake and Prince George. The service is meant to provide a safe, economical transportation system through the region. It came about as a recommendation from the Highway of Tears Symposium. A bizarre break-and-enter happened at Pine Center Mall as a truck smashed through a mall entrance in an attempted robbery. A witness reported seeing Mounties with guns drawn in the parking lot during the early morning incident. RCMP say 1 shot was fired by a masked suspect when he was surprised by a security guard during the attempted robbery. At that point, the suspect fled on foot. No injuries were reported. In August, we had an amazing story of a daycare worker who fought off a man who tried to abduct several children. Chelsea Sabby told us how she went toe-to-toe with the man at one point, using mixed martial arts skills she had been taught at a young age to send him running, beaten and battered.
He starts throwing punches. He hits me in the face several times. I then knocked him down again off of the playground equipment. I jumped down, I knocked the guy down again, and I put him in a headlock. And I'm screaming at the children to go and, run to the lady with the white shirt, and I'm screaming at the lady to get all 6 children inside of her house and lock the door. He jumps up, he again punches me several times in the head, and we go at it. At this time, it kind of turned nasty. I had to grab him by the hair and knee him in the face a few times. And then he ran away. He ran through the bushes. Never expected myself to be able to take down a grown man. And unfortunately, you have to get quite physical to do so, because regardless that I was telling him to leave them alone and the children were running, he was very persistent. And it had to get violent. I had no choice but to hurt him and get him on the ground. There was no way I was letting him get away with one of the children.
Still to come, after years of being closed, Springwood Elementary reopened its doors. Plus, we'll soon be sharing our story of the year selected by you, the viewer. Welcome back. In September, thousands of students in School District 57 went back to school. And with a lot of planning and work, Springwood Elementary reopened its doors to nearly 200 students. Some of the staff at Springwood Elementary took the time to write welcoming messages on the sidewalks. Staff, students, and parents were looking forward to the first day of school. Springwood was closed in 2010, and this past year the school district approved to reopen it.
It was a day met with much anticipation. Staff, students, parents have been looking forward to this day, and it was just so wonderful to have it actually happen. We've been waiting for it, just to see many smiling faces.
For the first time in their history, the Prince George Cougars captured a WHL banner. The Cougars finished first in the BC division for the season. They faced the Portland Winterhawks in the first opening round of the playoffs, but were knocked out. Greyhound is hoping to pull out of northern BC. The announcement came after the company announced a 51% ridership drop since 2010 along 5 affected routes, including 3 through Prince George. Greyhound Canada says there was a loss of $14.1 million in passenger operations in BC during the 2011-2012 fiscal year. Thousands turned up at Massage Place Stadium for the 25th annual Relay for Life walk. To begin the 24-hour event had already raised $420,000, which is the most ever to start the event. The goal for 2017 was $550,000, which was surpassed by $584,000. There were 33 walkers who committed to walking for 24 hours straight and finished Sunday morning at 10 a.m. The fundraiser raises money for cancer research. It is Canada's only 24-hour relay. The Chief Commissioner of the National Inquiry into Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and Girls was in the region. Marion Buller attended the annual general meeting of the Carrier-Sekani Family Services in Notley-Wooten near Fraser Lake. Buller has faced criticism over the pace of the inquiry, which began last September. The cost of the inquiry is set to cost Canadians $53.8 million, but Buller adds she will be asking the federal government for more time and more money to complete the inquiry. The City of Prince George hosted a massive party to show their thanks to the volunteers and residents who stepped up during the wildfire crisis supporting evacuees. There was free food provided by Save On Foods that fed thousands of people who turned up over the course of the evening. Live entertainment was provided by Barney Bentel and Glass Tiger and DJ Ant. Williams Lake Mayor Walt Cobb was in attendance and presented Mayor Lynn Hall and the City of Prince George with a thank you plaque. Prince George accepted over 10,000 evacuees this summer, many of whom which were from Williams Lake. In October, Prince George residents approved 2 major projects during a referendum. Residents voted nearly 83% in favor of borrowing $15 million to replace the aging fire hall in downtown. They also voted nearly 63% in favor of borrowing $35 million to build a replacement for the Four Seasons pool. Mayor Lynn Hall says there weren't any surprises with the outcome, but is overjoyed with the results. Prince George's largest hunting store announced that it was closing its doors. All 12 of its retail locations across Canada's 4 western provinces closed down. Inventory was liquidated at each location and was managed through an inventory asset management specialist. Wholesale Sports was a wholly owned subsidiary of United Farmers of Alberta Cooperative, UFA. This was an all-inclusive business decision that, while difficult, was made in the best interest of UFA on behalf of our members, said Carol Kitchen, UFA President and Chief Executive Officer. The Prince George Sears location survived cuts by the company this summer, but that didn't last long. The company announced that the Prince George location, along with all Sears stores in the country, would be closed by the end of the year. A total of 66 jobs were lost locally. The retailer received court approval to liquidate all of its remaining stores and assets and says it deeply regrets the loss of jobs and store closures. Sears was operating under protection from its creditors since June and failed to find a buyer. Erica Uwacha with the Prince George Chamber of Commerce said the closure of the store at Pine Centre leaves a gap other retailers will need to fill. November came with the announcement of another business closing its doors. After 37 years in business, Ritchie Brothers closed its auction site on the east end of Prince George. The company says it's streamlining its operation. Prince George is one of 5 North American locations that was closed by the end of December. 6 local jobs were lost with the move. When Ritchie Brothers opened its Prince George location in 1980, it was just the 3rd auction house in the company. Since then, Ritchie Brothers has grown into an international operation with more than 500,000 customers in 190 countries.
The ability for customers to buy and sell assets online is becoming a growing trend. I'm not saying that the true auction model will ever go away, because it's very well accepted in certain regions. And I mean, our plan going forward is to continue to wrap our arms around the customer base in this part of the world. And when the need arises, we will come back to Prince George and conduct an auction sale. However, it just won't be at this facility.
A provincial report looking into the moose population was shared with the Spruce City Wildlife Association. Biologists from the province were invited to the association to share some of its data they've collected. Surveys conducted by provincial biologists show that since the early 2000s, some areas of the interior have seen a 70% decline in the moose population. The Spruce City Wildlife is taking steps towards working with biologists to bring moose numbers back up.
The last 5-6 months, we've been in talks with some people in the neighborhood, and we've got some pretty big donations coming. We're going to be doing a very big fundraiser with 100% of dollars raised going to moose-related projects and conservation projects directly related to moose in the Prince George area.
In December, a man who played a large role in the development of Prince George through the 1970s and 80s passed away. Art Stovall was elected as an alderman with the city in 1974 and helped to oversee the combining of the Hart Highlands, College Heights, South Fort George, and other areas under the city of Prince George. He served as the chairman of the regional district for 6 years in the 80s. He also served as the chair for the hospital board. Horst Sanders knew Art well, with both men working in the sawmilling business in the early years.
Based with our factory, with our manufacturing processing, we call it planing mills in those days. You know, the lumber was sawn out in the woods. It came in, it was air dried. We didn't have kilns in those days. And then in the spring, the lumber would be processed and planed and dressed, and then shipped out. So we both were in those functions down north on the north side of the Nechako.
December saw the passing of another prominent member of the community with the death of a man who exemplified health care in the north. Dr. Bert Kelly made his passion for health care in the north with a rally at the then multiplex in June of 2000. He became the advocate for better health services in the north from that moment on. His work led to the first students at the Northern Medical School at UNBC in 2005. His mantra was train in the North, stay in the North, but it didn't end there. His work ultimately led to the Cancer Center for the North. MLA Shirley Bond described Dr. Kelly as the pebble in her shoe.
I saw him not only as an incredible physician, but he was a pretty savvy politician. He knew how to get things done. And we had many conversations about the things that mattered here in northern British Columbia. And I came to fondly refer to him as a pebble in my shoe. One of those people that remind you every day that you have a job to do and you'd better do it well or you're going to be held accountable for it.
Stay with us as we will be revealing our Story of the Year selected by you. Time now to reveal our Story of the Year selected by you. 2017 brought the worst wildfire season in the history of British Columbia. More than 10,000 residents evacuated and over 1 million hectares of land charred. With so many forced from their homes, thousands came to Prince George in search of refuge and aid. With a great need of support, citizens of Prince George were more than willing to lend a helping hand.
The second floor of the Civic Center was packed this morning as people lined up to lend a hand. The City of Prince George, in partnership with Volunteer Prince George, opened a volunteer center to help direct support to evacuees. It will train, schedule, and deploy people.
That's really behind this whole registration effort, is to manage this effectively, but also to align the skills of volunteers with where they can be put to use the best.
The city put the call out and the people came, each with a reason to get involved.
Actually, we were in Kelowna in the 2003 fire, so we experienced that, and also the Glen Rosa fire a couple of years later. We were involved in the evacuations, so definitely want to help out if I can.
I've got plenty of time to do that kind of thing, and I think it's very, very important that we show the care and attention that these people need.
Within hours of it opening, over 1,000 people registered at the Volunteer Center, something the city says is reflective on the kind of community we live in.
It's incredible to see the response from people in the community. It's one of those days, there's a lot of them thankfully, but it's definitely one of those days when you feel really proud to be from Prince George, that's for sure.
Take it from someone who has lived here for 52 years. The Volunteer City has earned its name.
Whenever there's something that needs volunteers, Prince George shows up.
More help is always appreciated. For the time being, the center will be open 7 days a week from 8 a.m. until 8 p.m.
Thank you for joining us for our look back at 2017. Join us in 2018 for the CKPG News weekdays at noon, 5, 6:30, and 11.